Good evening, everybody. If you were just screaming at the screen saying we can't hear you, we can't hear you, yes, I know. I've got a brand new waiting screen, which just involves me on the camera because it gets people's attention a little bit better. Good evening, welcome along. It is Inspire and Be Inspired, our weekly motivational conversations with the occasional life hack thrown in for good measure. If it's the first time you happen upon this, my name is Andy Ward. It's a pleasure to have your company. Tonight we are discussing the confessions of a nurse, an NHS nurse, a lady who's had over 30 years experience working for the NHS, and a beautiful lady that many of our friends will be more than aware of. It's a fully interactive conversation, so please do feel free to leave any messages. And also, the way I've got things set up now, if you like the video or if you share the video, you'll see some flashy new graphics come up, and it all helps for the engagement. It helps a lot more than you know, actually. So if you could like the video and maybe share it, it would really go a long way. I always start off by saying, if you are watching the recording, then welcome along, and also feel free to comment on anything that we say, because myself and my guest will see all of the replies. I can see here that we have the lovely Andrea, Sarah, Mrs. Ward, Mr. Miller, Debs, Gary, Katrina. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Much appreciated. And you see the graphics start to ping up on the screen. A little later than usual to try and get as many of you watching as possible. And towards the end of the show, if you keep watching, if you didn't see it at the weekend, you'll get a sneak peek at the whole new setup here in the studio. We've even got some fancy lights behind us. Anyway, without further ado, let me bring on my esteemed guest and say good evening, good evening, good evening, Angela Colosi, our wonderful NHS nurse. How are you? You all right?
I'm all right, thank you, Andy. And it's nice to hear that I'm amongst friends as well. So that
Yeah.
that makes it a bit less daunting.
We have quite a few friends watching. I'm just moving some graphics out of the way there because I could see already they were messing around. I do my best to try and make everything look as smooth as possible. And I always make a rod for my own back because it always goes wrong at the last minute. So that's all good. As you know, because you do listen to a lot of the recordings, we try to make it as interactive as possible. You and I will be deep in conversation. Occasionally, I will stop and draw reference to the people who are commenting, and I'll welcome along also Dawn O'Connor. Also, we have Yvonne, Ralph in Germany, Phil Madison, Lynn Henson. They're all rolling in thick and fast, so thank you for being here, guys. I'm going to try a thing.
Chip in at any time.
Yeah, everybody feel free to chip in. I will do my best to read all of the comments. And you saying that, actually, I have a window. Let me try something. If I change this screen, what's gone on? Yes, all of the comments are there. So I've changed the window so that it brings it up onto the screen. Can you read those, or is that text really small?
No, yours page is frozen for me,
Oh, really?
and that might
Okay.
not be. That's probably my Wi-Fi or whatever.
No, I think
Although
it. Yeah, I
I'm
think it
connected
might
to
be
the
myself.
internet. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we can see all of the people there. So people, we're only broadcasting on Facebook now, so people can read all of the comments anyway. So I don't actually need to broadcast those again onto the screen. Andy Mills joins us. Good evening, sir. How are you? Thanks for being here. Joanne Hill also. And Andrea is saying she keeps getting the sound cutting out. If anyone else notices the sound cutting out, please let me know. It could be something to do with the way that I've got my OBS set up, but I'm not going to be changing anything now, so everything should be okay, he says.
If it's me, if it's my cutting out, I could put my earphones back on and look like I'm at work.
No, it's not you. It's not you.
Okay.
People are saying it's buffering, it's lagging. Um, Let me see about this. Changing. Let me see if I can change any settings. Getting a lot of buffering. People are saying it might be. No, I don't think it's anything to do with me. Maybe if I stop messing around. Let's see if it settles down. Let's see if it settles down. It might be because I was changing some scenes and whatever. If it is actually too bad for people to hear it, then I'm not really sure what I can do about that. But anyway, 5 minutes of faffing about. Let's just have the conversation, you and I, and then hopefully it will calm down and people will be able to participate. So you and I met at some point on the clubbing landscape, more than likely courtesy of the Southport Weekender message board, and then subsequently we probably would have rubbed shoulders and shared a beer on a dance floor. And then in recent years we've got to know each other quite well, thanks to you joining us at the Vocal Booth Weekender. You have a long history in the clubbing scene. You began quite early on, and I'm still getting lots of notifications that the buffering is really bad. So because we've got so many people watching, I want to try and fix this.
Because I'm looking at it on Facebook, and it's you where neither of us are moving. I don't know if people can hear us, but we're certainly not moving on the screen. So
Right,
it's a bit,
okay, so you can't see me at the moment. Let me change the camera.
I can see you on Facebook. Um,
Yeah, yeah, but we don't want that. So can you see me? No, that's the wrong camera. Right, so now you can see me, correct?
and you're
Yeah,
moving just fine, and you're in sync. So I
okay.
don't know if it.
So let me see if me disabling something has made any difference to the buffering. The sound is okay, just the picture has frozen. Too many windows open. Yeah, computer says no. What can I close down? Let me shut. Oh, it's okay now. I'll sort it. I know what it was. I was trying to be flash, trying to show you. I feel saying it's okay. That's better. Right.
Right.
Okay. Better now. Good. We got there. We got there. See, it's worth testing these things. That's me trying to be clever, Clugs. So it is nice because the whole point of this is for people to listen and participate. So we all know what kind of windows people are saying. I'm going to ignore the comments for the time
I can't
being
see the comments, thank
and
goodness.
get focused. That they're all talking about my porn addiction, probably, allegedly. So yes, let's begin again. We spoke about we would have met via the Southport Weekender message board. Eventually, we would have shared a beer on a dance floor somewhere, and then in recent years, you've become a big fan of the Vocal Booth Weekender, and we enjoy one another's company. Not nearly enough, maybe once a year over here in Spain. You have been listening to the shows. You enjoy the variety of conversations that we have. And when I reached out and asked if anybody would like to put forward some suggestions on what we can talk about, you actually, somebody else put your name forward. Can you remember who
Yeah,
it was?
Stu Miller.
It was Stu Miller. Okay. So fair play to Stu, the booze hand. Um,
Oh
and
yes, I'd forgotten his name.
yeah, yeah, Boo saying shit. It feels like 5 minutes ago, right? 20 years ago. It's
It does.
crazy. And I asked if you would have the nerve to do this. And of course, you spend a lot of time on Zoom calls and Teams and meetings, so you're not shy at all. And of course, you were the proud winners of a competition that we did, the quiz that we'd done in the middle of the pandemic. You
That
know, so
wasn't thanks to me. That was Rick. And in
that
the
was
end, I was
down.
kicking him under the table. So be quiet. He's like a sponge. He's got a lot of knowledge. Yeah.
I'm being told. I'm being told there's a lovely pic of the back of my head. How is there a picture of the back of my head?
Let me look on Facebook, see if I can see that.
That should be okay. It should be broadcasting like this to the front.
It's frozen on my Facebook again. Isn't it a
Ah,
shame?
yeah. Let me have a look. I got to mute this. Make sure that no, it all looks okay. It looks all right. Anyway, uh, I think it
That's
might just be
fine.
for different people. If everyone tries refreshing their windows, refreshing their screens. So let's get to the crux of this. You were born more or less. What kind of year were you born? So okay, well, people
Very
with good
personal
maths.
question, but I'm willing to share it. 1964.
Well, I was going to say people will be able to work it out from the maths anyway when we start telling them about the years you were going out and whatever. So you would have started clubbing in the early 80s. Should we just put it like that?
No, late 70s.
Okay.
Yeah. I was working in a nightclub at 16.
Okay, tell us all about that then.
Um, Crumbs. So I was trying to leave home from about the age of 15. Typical rebellious teenager, very independent, fiercely independent. And so, yeah, so I started going out quite a lot. And I ended up working in pubs and clubs from the age of 16. So then eventually my dad my mum and dad let me go at 17 because I just kept trying to leave and with my carrier bags, and my dad would come and pick me up and take me home again. So I left home at 17. And I knew I wanted to be a nurse and I knew I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to do those two things because I'd done tap and ballet and festivals and pantomimes and things like that as a child. But I couldn't start my nurse training because I was only 17, so you had to be 18. So I went and sofa surfed with friends who were much older than me from the age of 17, 17 and a half. And then when I was finally 18, I could then finally start my nursing. And I'd
Okay, so
already got myself a little bed sit, so I was living independently.
what was the
I got
desire? What was the huge desire for you to get out of the house?
um, I
Was that a
yeah,
bit personal?
well, it's sort of linked to why I became a nurse actually.
Okay.
So so I, the only way I'm going to say it is that there wasn't much demonstration of affection, and I can't really go into any more than that. I will over a
No, that's
beer one
fine.
day. Um, but basically, I thought I wanted to become a nurse because I'd read the Ladybird book of nursing, The Nurse. You know, there's little ladybug series.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, yeah, I want to be a nurse. I had a little nurse outfit when I was a child, so I thought, yeah, I'd like to be a nurse. Then I watched Angels, which was a 1980s sort of program on telly, or no, 70s actually, about a group of student nurses who then became nurses. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. So that's what I thought. I thought that was the reason why I wanted to be a nurse. But when I did my Florence Nightingale's leadership scholarship only a few years back, we did 3 days at RADA at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, and my goodness, what an eye opener those 3 days were. So it was all about presentation and self awareness and confidence building, really, as a presenter. But the last task that we had 5 minutes to decide why it was we wanted to be a nurse, and we had to present that to. They got the CEO in of Florence Nightingale Foundation and a little audience. So we were all sitting in a semicircle, and where as you got up and did your piece, then you chose the next person. And all of a sudden, I was back in the playground, waiting to be picked for the netball team, and thinking, why is no one picking me? And I'd had this awful feeling of insecurity, lack of being loved. It all just flooded over me, and I. So when it came to my turn, I wasn't last; I was second to last. But I stood up and I told them, I said, I had all this story prepared that it was because of the Ladybird book and angels and all the rest of it. I said, but as I've been sitting here, I've realised that the reason I've wanted to become a nurse all this time is because I spent a lot of time in hospital as a child. I was in with measles, appendicitis, tonsillectomy, adenoidectomy. And I wanted to replicate that caring, loving, affectionate role of the nurse and the impact and the role modelling that gave me as a small child. So that
Mm-hmm.
is actually why I left home early and why I became a nurse.
Okay, so that all ties in. That all ties in perfectly. Um, okay, well, I'm sure that will pop back up again at some point in the future when we're conversing. So, sofa surfing, and you finally became. So, before we start talking about the nursing, let's talk more about your early clubbing, working in the clubs and being a dancer.
Yeah, so the dance bit wasn't in clubs. Clubbing wise, I went to like the local. We had a little disco at the Blind Centre where it was oranges and biscuits. So that was when Earth, Wind and Fire and Peaches and Herb and no, is it Peaches and Cream? You know that reunited because
Hmm.
it was that era anyway. So we had all those sort of school disco type things, and then I remember being a member of the Hastings Horny Hatsters, which was in those days we had groups. So at the club, so at the end of Hastings Pier, we had a really big ballroom, and it was a really good club night on a Friday. There were the Eastbourne Earls, and it was gangs of soul people that would all
Right.
come together. You'd all wear the same outfit and you'd all dance and do stupid things. It was great. So that was sort of like that was that bit of the clubbing. And then I discovered Caister at the age of 17. Went to Caister. That was my love of the weekenders. Did Prestatyn, um, Barry Island. Oh God, all of those. Fwelly, that was another one. So Bognor, did all of those sort of weekenders in the south really. But also the soul aspect of it and the music taste and everything. That's why I really love Colin's talk, because he was in London, and that was sort of the clubs that he went to, the same as what Rick went to, and I knew about. So yeah, it all sort of tied in really. But the dancing part of it was I'd been qualified for 6 months, so I did my training 83 to 86. I've been qualified for 6 months on a surgical ward, and then I got this. My mum gave me a newspaper that she bought from WH Smith's called The Stage, and it had an advert in there to go to Pineapple Studios because they wanted cruise staff and dancers on a cruise liner. So I had the day off, so I went up there for something to do really. So there were all these people. I was just going to watch, but there were 200 girls, and they wanted five dancers for Royal Caribbean cruise liner, the smallest ship of the fleet, the Sun Viking. And I got down to the last 20, and then I came back the next day, and they got down to eight, and then they shuffled us around, and they wanted like the Spice Girls, so they wanted a blonde one, a dark one, it was a bit like that really. And but in 2 weeks' time, I was in Miami, and
Right.
that's where I met Rick. So that was the dancing part of me. I
Fantastic.
did
And
a lot of
so when you
dancing on the
say
bicycle.
dancing, all very cabaret kind of.
Yeah, it was a proper showgirl,
Uh huh.
feathers, and we did two review show a week. So that was all of the Broadway musicals. So we did Hello Dolly and Oklahoma and all that sort of stuff. And then we did cabaret nights where we do all the American sort of, with the boaters and the red, white, and blue stripes and all that sort of stuff. Tap routines. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was a real. But I got really, really bored towards the end of that. So after about a year, Rick had finished his contract and he was back in London, and I got offers of marrying rich Americans and going to Canada, and I had an offer from the agency that I worked for to go and work on land. I could have done more on the ships. I was bored stiff. I really was bored. It was, if I heard one more girl talk about what lettuce leaves she'd eaten that day, I thought, and I was always getting told off by the line manager because I always ate too much. So he used to say to me, "You're putting on weight, and just stop going to the midnight buffet." And so then I started buying nursing books and started reading books about nursing and emergency care and all that sort of stuff. So when after that I went, so after the contract finished, I had a bit of an odd choice because I had a choice to go back to Hastings and marry my long-term 8-year boyfriend who was saying come home, or
Okay.
to go and live
Oh, so
with
you had a
Rick.
fling. You had a fling on the boat then.
Rick was a fling, yes. So then I had the choice of going back to Hastings and back to my life as was, or going to London with Rick. So I chose the latter, and the rest, as they say, is history. So
Wonderful.
I went back to London and got straight back into nursing. I worked for agencies for quite a long time, so I was in sort of some highlights or moments that I remember really well. I was on the night of the King's Cross fire, so I was working in ITU at the time and had to
Right.
look after this poor lady who was just all you could see. The only pink bit of this person's body was her lips, where the tube was in. The rest of her was just black char. It was horrendous. We had some firemen that came in, where their hands were completely burnt. It was really horrific that night. And I never got rid of that smell for quite a long time of, burning. It was horrible. So,
Right. So,
yeah.
so just remind me then, because I'm listening to you and my mind drifted off there. So you were working always in the ITU. That was your role.
Yeah, predominantly. So I'd only been qualified 6 months, remember, and then I'd
Okay.
gone off and done a year on the ship. So when I came back, when you work for an agency, especially in London, it's a bit, you're in at the deep end. So they phoned me up one day and they said to me, because I did a bit of Charing Cross on the general wards and that, and then they said, guys need an ITU nurse, and I said, well, that's not me. And they said, oh, they only need a pair of hands. You'll only be a pair of hands. So, of course, by the end of the night, I was looking after an intubated patient, ventilated patient, under supervision, of course. But
Of
you pick it
course.
up quite quick. And actually, ITU nursing, I always found easier. It's easier than having sort of like 10 to 14 patients with varying needs, having to look after all of them. With ITU nursing, you're just looking after one person. So it was actually I just loved it. I loved it because at the end of the shift, I knew that I'd done everything for that person that I could possibly do. So that became my role of choice and my role of expertise. So
Okay.
yeah.
And so you're always having to study, I suppose is the right word, or constantly learning and going through, because as your the need expands for different circumstances, you're always having to keep on top of the game.
Yeah, so you're always learning on the job, always. We also now have a requirement that we do have to do continual professional development, and we need to be able to demonstrate that every 3 years in order to re-register. But back then, that wasn't the case at all. And actually, my academic sort of studying stopped at that point, really, while I was in London. And if you skip forward to 2001, so there was a whole heap of stuff in between, but you skip forward to 2001, I'd had 5 years off to look after our four children through choice, because the amount of childcare, I just didn't want to be, I wanted to be a mum at home with them when they were young. So I chose to do that. But when I went back to nursing in 2001, I'd missed it by a month. So you could do, if it was 4 years and 11 months, you could come back to the hospital, do a little return to practicing, re-register, and you were away. But I missed it by a month, so I had to predominantly do my whole training again. So
Wow.
I had to do my diploma, which was a 3 year course. So whilst working as a registered nurse, so it was a return to practice thing, but they wouldn't register me until I'd done that. So for 10 years, I did my diploma in general nursing. I did my bachelor's honours degree in district nursing. So I became a district nurse, and I then did my master's in advanced practice. So that was back to back for 10 years whilst working full time and looking after four under 10s. So I couldn't have done it without Rick. We were doing it together as a team because he was my rock.
And
Um,
what was he
incredible.
doing? What was his
So
position in life at the time?
yeah, so when I went back to nursing, Rick, when I had that 5 years off with the children, Rick was the breadwinner. So he would go to London mini cabin um,
Okay.
nearly every weekend. He worked in a tyre, so he's a tyre expert.
Okay.
Um, he also worked during that time. He also worked in a yeah. So whilst I was at home with the kids, he was working at a local fish and chip restaurant with a fantastic Greek bloke called Johnny, and the pair of them together were hilarious, absolutely hilarious. They had the best time ever. So he'd do that during the week, and then at weekends he'd do mini cabin as well. But we did it together as a team. We didn't go out anywhere for 15 years. We literally did not go out. We tried once to go to the cinema, and it was a disaster. We came home
Right.
fairly quickly. So the first time we went out was Southport weekender. Rick said to me, because I said, look, I need a night out. Like, we've got to start going out. The kids are all old enough now. The eldest one can babysit. And he said, oh, well, I've heard of this really good weekender, and it looks like the DJs, the music are quite good. It's called Southport. and we went to Southport 40, and the rest is history.
What year was that?
Oh, crumbs! I knew you were going to ask me that. I haven't got a clue.
Roughly
Well, Verna would have.
2007, 2010.
So Verna would have been a babysitting age. So if you call it, no, and more importantly, my mum and dad would look after the four of them because they were old enough. Oh, crumbs! I really don't know.
Well, just
I mean,
roughly
she was
fourth.
born in '92, so call it 2000 and around about 2005, six.
Okay, so because
I'm
the reason
guessing.
I was asking, at the height of the Southport Weekender message board, it would have been 2001, 2002. You would have been vicariously living your clubbing night on that forum without going
Yeah,
out, but just reliving it, kind of thing.
yeah, but I don't think it would have been. I don't think I would have been on the message boards. Like I would have gone to Southport sort of fairly soon after. So maybe it was a bit earlier than that, Andy. I'm not sure.
Or maybe it was a bit later. I'm thinking because
Yeah,
I,
more likely a
I
bit later.
relate my times. I relate my history to when we moved to Spain and how active I was on the forums, and so that was like 2002, 2004. We're still getting people commenting all the way through. Thank you guys. As I said before, I don't really want to interrupt and lose the train of conversation. Um, so we're talking about. I had a couple of points that I wanted to ask you. The early days of working for the NHS, when we were talking, and I made that quite tongue in cheek graphic with the stereotypical nurse in the uniform with the stockings, and you said I'd like to have a little bit more respect for the profession, Andy. Can we not have an image with the nurse showing the stockings and suspenders,
It
even
wouldn't
though
go
we
down
all
well
used
with
to
my
wear
fellow
them?
colleagues, I don't think. No, or my profession. But actually, we did. That's exactly what we looked like in the early days. 83, 84. The old boys had a field day. You had to get the Marks and Spencer's petticoat because you had suspenders and stockings underneath. So, that was a depiction of what it was like. It was a
Hmm.
matron back then. And it's really interesting because I looked at the book of the Ladybird Book of Nursing, and read a page of it, and it actually says doctors in the hospitals find out about the patient's illnesses, then the doctors tell the nurses what to do to help the patients to get better. The nurses carry out the doctor's orders and care for the patients until they are well enough to go home. Honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth now. It really could not be further from the truth. We haven't got enough trained any profession to manage the demand that is being placed upon the healthcare system in this country. So therefore the roles are being blurred. So nurses do more of what doctors traditionally did. Physios do more of what doctors and nurses traditionally do. So there's almost like a basic assessment that you could do, a holistic assessment you could do for a patient. And the differential diagnoses that come out from that could be your local pharmacist. It could be a nurse practitioner. It could be an advanced clinical practitioner. It could be an ODP, Andrea. So, the roles are blurred now. So that depiction couldn't be further from the truth. But back in the day, yes, that's what nurses were like. And
So there was a
actually,
huge.
I think they had a lot more respect.
Well, I was just about to say there was a huge badge of honor associated with being a nurse back then. It was seen as very glamorous. It was seen again as a noble profession to be in. Were the wages? I have no clue. Were the wages good back in the day, or were they? Are
I
they
remember
always
when I
been
did my
useless?
training, I got £400 a month. So,
Okay.
but my training was paid for. That was enough for me to live on back then. We've done ourselves a slight disservice in that we've pushed to be an all graduate profession. So our physiotherapy colleagues, our occupational therapy colleagues, they're degree trained, and we never were. It was always that we did our 3-year nurse training. It wasn't linked to a health education institution, so it wasn't linked to a university. So we fought hard to become a degree profession, but but because of that, we now have to do a degree, and that costs £27,000. So, like any kid that wants to do a degree now, they have to fund it themselves, don't they? So there is an apprenticeship levy that will pay for it. But the problem is nowadays there isn't the salary backfill money to pay student nurses to do their training. So, or at least the funds are very limited, and it's all dependent on your board and your finance director and what funds are available. And of course, we're all living in a period of austerity now. Not just personally and privately, but the NHS. They've spent billions on COVID, and they've got to pay that back somehow. So we're being asked to make cuts as much as any other government department. Um, so the wages were a livable wage as a student nurse, and then when you got paid, again, it was a livable wage. But as it's well publicised, the rates of pay, haven't gone up with inflation. So it's not a bad wage when you first qualify as a student, as a trained nurse. But if you're a single parent with 3 kids, you've got no hope. You can't live on that. It's cheaper to be on housing benefit probably. It's really, really tough. And I'm well paid, but I've worked really hard to get to this position to be well paid. In my clinical work, I got to nurse consultant level. So it's okay for me because I can retire fairly soon. Whereas my children, if they wanted to go into nursing, they've got a lot longer to work really. And it is an exhausting job. There's no getting away from it. You invest physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically into what you do because you want to help people and you want to do the right thing.
I think we all remember being of more or less the same age, give or take. Many years ago, the whole I can't ever think quickly enough when I'm doing these. There was that huge drama about doctors working for 60, 70 hours shifts, and there was a huge thing about it in the media that doesn't seem that long ago, but I know it was some time ago. Things if you can immediately pinpoint some of the darkest times in your career, when would you say that would be?
Well, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious to everyone really that COVID was probably the darkest time that I've ever seen. But it is interesting because I showed you a picture, didn't I? The only picture that I've got of me in a hat and a uniform was when I was a student nurse,
We'll
and
try throw it up now. We can throw it up.
if
No
it will.
problem. While you're finding that, let me just read a couple of long conversations, long comments here. Dawn O'Connor's with us. Hiya, Dawn. She will definitely relate to a lot of this. Andrea's saying so many people that would be amazing nurses or health professionals don't go into the profession due to it being too academic now. It's the worst thing they ever did. And then Diana Capillaire says, hi guys, I think a much undervalued profession and within a broken system. However, I thank you all for your hard work, care and dedication. Thank you, Diana. Nice to have you with us. I hope everything's going great. We'll talk soon. Okay, so tell us about this.
Can I just come back on that bit about it's too academic now? Absolutely, and they finally recognise that. So we now have got the registered nurse and associate, and we're going to have about 30 trained over the next 3 years, who are the equivalent of what used to be the state enrolled nurse. So we'd have the state registered nurse, which was a 3-year training, and then we'd have the state enrolled nurse, which was a 2-year training. And it's not the same, and I'm not allowed to say it's the same, but actually it's similar in that there's still an academic component to it, but it's not maybe as rigorous or the same as a degree. So it's more at diploma level. So at least we've got that now, but that's going to take a little while to come through. So yeah,
Right.
but you see the lady in the long dark coat in the middle of the picture,
Literally just on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the nurse with next to her in the white dress, with the hat, and the really bad hairstyle, the fringe.
To be fair, they're all identical.
The 80s fringe, that's me in the middle there. And that's the only picture I've got of me with a hat on. So yeah,
Cuts
that's
cost lives, and we said that's
yeah.
around about 1985,
Yeah.
1986.
So look at the banners. We're running out of patients. Wall closures, cuts don't heal, help us to help you. And I've just balloted. I've just sent my ballot paper off from the RCN, which is the Royal College of Nursing, are asking us to strike. Basically, that's what they're recommending. So it's like it's gone full circle. So, but those times weren't dark. And the reason those times weren't dark was because we laughed. We had the darkest sense of humour. probably not politically correct, but it got us through, and we had such fun. We were allowed to laugh, but we weren't as exhausted as we are. Well, the difference is that I remember being a third year student nurse doing nights on a medical ward, 28 beds, and there was me and a healthcare assistant, and we had the registered nurse was over the corridor. But the difference was that it was a Nightingale ward. So by that it means you could see everybody. So you'd sit at the top of the ward, you could see everybody. So no one fell. No one fell because they were restrained in a loving way. So you used to get these chairs, and people would be put in these chairs, and they'd be tipped back in the chair, and then you could tip them forward for them to eat. So no one fell like they're all falling. Patients fall now. So it was a whole different world, and you could manage on less staff because you didn't have individual bays. Whereas now we have set staffing numbers. It's not mandatory. In Wales, it's mandatory, but it's not mandatory at the moment. So it's not in law that we have to have a set amount of staff. So we're constantly battling for the right numbers of staff. And for me, it's about recruiting people into the profession. So we've looked at our trust at the leavers. So who's leaving out of the profession? And there are a lot of experienced near retirement, because don't forget, everyone wanted to be a nurse in the 80s. So they're all coming up retirement age now, and they're all retiring. And COVID pushed them over the edge, and they're going. But in our particular trust, it's the retirees that are going, and all that experience that goes with it, leaving a very inexperienced workforce. But I've just read a report in the Nursing Times 2 days ago where the King's Fund, who are a big academic body, they've done some research, and it's actually the under 45s that are leaving nursing. So they're going into nursing, they can't, it's too much, and they're leaving. So for me, the only way that we're going to make this profession attractive going forward and in the future is if we have real support for Generation Z young people, because there were the millennials, and now there's the Generation Z, and they need more support. And also they know they can expect more. And they also don't just go into one profession or one job and stay in it. They'll go into a job, and then they'll do that part-time, and then they get another part-time job, and then they're more mobile in their working habits,
in their approach to
yeah,
life. So
because they
my
know they
brother.
can do that. So they've got multiple income streams. So that's a phrase that we've heard like recently. So that seems to be more attractive. And especially with the world of technology, you can do it sitting in your front room, So why would they want to go through the rigors of being a nurse?
The
So
hands-on approach.
we need motivational people who can really attract, go into primary schools and talk about being a nurse, get some really good programs on the telly that actually portray nursing in a positive way. But more importantly, when people get onto the wards, they need support. And by that, we need practice educator roles. So not just managers, senior nurses running a ward, we need senior nurses supporting the junior staff to stay and look after them.
I've had experience in hospitals recently with close family members. My brother actually works for the NHS or for a trust. I can't tell you exactly what he does, but anyway, the conversations that we have had in the past he was telling me that you don't get or there hasn't been the care associated with that that was there in the past, because there's a lot of agency work, and the people that come in for a day or two, they don't have that personal close relationship with their patients, and you can see that by the way that the care is given to patients. And he was saying that that's a major problem right now. Is that across the board?
So there was a big government drive, and we got direction from NHS England. It was a few years back, it was before COVID, that you've got to stop using agency nurses, really. So you have to stop, because I could go and earn probably twice as much as what I earn now in consultancy or in it. And what's really interesting is that agency nurses are prepared to travel the country. So they will work they will live in London, and that they'll travel down here, stay for the weekend, and we provide the accommodation for that as well, and in our medical colleagues as well. So so yes, I think that's an issue, but I also think that who can blame them really if what we're offering in the NHS is not comparable? So who can blame them? And also, what happens is that if it's a nice place to work, which I believe our trust to be, they stay. So they're like long-term agency workers. So they're part of the workforce actually, quite a lot.
But
Especially, I
they're
don't know
on
if it's.
a much higher salary
Oh
than
yeah,
the regular
yeah.
workers. So
But I don't
that
know if it's
causes a
the
lot
way
of unrest. Sorry, I'm talking over you. That must cause a lot of unrest within the troops, so to speak.
yes and no, but everyone knows that they've got the option to do that as well. Some people prefer to work in the NHS, and the reason for that is we've got good terms and conditions compared to other private providers. So we get a decent pension. If we stay in the NHS, we get a decent pension. There's also something about the quality of the work that the NHS provides. It's second to none, really,
Hmm.
in terms of look what happened with COVID. I can't believe yeah, we got things wrong. Of course we did. But the mobilisation of that whole vaccination, managing demand, um, and now the added work burden of actually trying to catch up for patients so that they get all of the backlog that we're dealing with as well, plus all of the unplanned admissions that are coming through the front door because they haven't been able to get a face-to-face primary care GP appointment. The demand is beyond huge now for the whole of the health and care system. So it's also our care home colleagues, domiciliary visits by carers. Everyone it's log jammed. The whole thing is backlogged and log jammed. And we're,
Hmm.
we're almost coming to a point now in the hospitals where it's one in, one out. But it is like that. So
Uh,
we're constantly managing this risk. But there's something about working in the NHS when it comes to research. So if you work in a university hospital, you're going to be involved in dynamic working and research as well. So it's always been attractive to work in the NHS if you're a healthcare professional. I think the scales are beginning to tip a bit now.
mhm. Well, there's lots of comments. I'm not sure if you still have your computer open and you can read these. It's difficult while you're working as well. Andrew says, who wants to pay to go to uni whilst working 37 and a half hours a week, which is what a nursing degree is, come out in debt and with a starting wage far less than your friends leaving uni who have attended 10 hours of lectures a week?
I mean, they can get a bursary to pay for the university fees, but it's the wage that is missing. Yeah.
Mhm. Bobby says it's quite scary to think where the NHS will end up. It's being pushed to the limits and people are suffering for this. It's not the hard-working staff who are to blame, but the government needs to pull its fingers out. Dawn O'Connor, our NHS is sadly broken and not a very attractive place to work now.
Yeah.
Yesterday, there were 15 ambulances at the emergency department waiting to offload patients. She's
Mm.
never known it that bad.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
it's
Um, our
crazy to
ambulance
read
service,
about.
they don't wait with the patients now. They drop them at the front door now. It's immediate handover. So they come because they have to get out to patients that are having heart attacks and real emergencies, and so therefore that puts additional pressure on the emergency department because it literally is full to the brim. I saw a Facebook post from somebody today who said it was like a war zone, and it is like a war zone. And we have to start streaming patients as though it were a war zone. It's terribly sad.
Who
It,
you
it
can
breaks my
treat,
heart.
who's important enough to treat immediately, and who gets so all the horror stories of people being sat waiting in wards on beds for hours on end. That it's somebody
But
mentioned
somehow
about.
we've got to try and, despite all of that, because otherwise we're fighting a vicious circle. We've got to rise above it, in some way. But we can't do it as individuals alone. So there are plenty of inspirational people still who, want to attract people back into the profession because we care about it. But we can't do that alone. So unless they're going to mandate that you must have set numbers of staff, nurses on a ward to look after patients, and don't forget district nursing as well. I mean I won't even go into, because we're an integrated trust, so we run district nursing services in East Sussex as well. But we've got to do something, but we can't do it alone. It has to be the government have to prioritise it as well. But do you know what? Interestingly, on our way back to the airport, me and Rick had a really good conversation with the taxi driver. It was a lady taxi driver, and when we were describing the NHS to her and how we have patients who come from abroad to get treatment, because I know that happens, we try and get the money back from them, but that isn't always successful. When I was describing the NHS to, completely objectively, it sounded completely mad. Why would we do work the way that we do? We're not in 1948 anymore, and I can really see us moving to a more privatised system. I mean, it's already privatised. It is in certain areas. It's already privatised.
Well,
But
for someone
but
like
it sounded
myself, who's
bananas the way I was describing this utopic system where you get everything for free.
so tell me my ignorance, the what privatization looks like and what it means. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? That might be a ridiculous question to ask, but it's just a question I'm asking anyway.
No, no, not at all. So when I say it's been privatised, so you'll pay in England, you'll pay money for your dentistry. So okay, yeah, it's subsidised, but that used to be free. And in Scotland, you don't pay for your prescriptions, but in England we do, and they're going up every 5 minutes. So GP surgeries, they are. I know of GP surgeries that have been bought up, so as a group, by American organisations. I'm not going to name any names, but they're run by American companies. Um, what else? Probably my colleagues can help me more, because private work. I mean, we do outsource private work as well. So a lot of that started in the pandemic.
So
Because
basically, the NHS becoming privatized would mean that you would have to have personal insurance plans, personal life care before you get looked at. Everything
yeah.
gets paid for.
So what's happening now is that we pay our national insurance. They could put that up a penny or a pound or whatever, and everyone would probably pay it. So that would put billions back into it. But for some reason they don't do that. Um, but what will happen by default is that there will no longer be an NHS. So if you can afford a private medical insurance plan, why would you not do that now, even though you can get free at the point of contact care from the NHS? If it's for a planned procedure like a knee replacement, why would you wait for 2 years in agony when you can afford a private medical plan? So I don't need a knee replacement at the moment. I might do in a couple of years' time. So I've actually joined Benenden, which is it's not quite a private medical insurance organisation, but they do, you can get fast tracked on it. And of course, don't forget, these are all the same doctors that are doing
Yeah.
the private work and the NHS work. So what will happen is, I think that it will become privatised by default. So all that can afford it will go to private medical insurance. They'll still get their emergency care, but what worries me is all of those that are left behind that can't afford medical insurance. They still require a service. They still require looking after. But it was quite incredible how
But
this taxi driver,
you've just kind of not contradicted yourself, but you said
probably I have, I'm
before
not very
it.
good with politics.
No, you said before that it sounds ludicrous to explain the NHS to somebody,
Yeah.
and yet at the same time you're saying that that is what the NHS provides to people. But why should it be provided to people? Or maybe I'm misunderstanding the way that you're saying it, because it is
Yeah.
an archaic model of
I,
providing
I,
that.
I believe it probably is now. I believe it probably is, but it's revered around the world. So if we're going to keep that name of the NHS, then yes, it needs to have a massive injection of resource. But I don't think that's coming anytime soon. Certainly not from our current government. So therefore, what will happen, I think, is that those that can afford, it's that poverty rich gap will expand. So although there'll be an NHS, it won't run in the same way as it should.
So do people know is there a solution that's glaringly obvious to people that the government aren't putting into place, or is it the fact that nobody really knows how to get out of this shitstorm, as many people call it?
Yeah, I mean, when you think back to 1948 when it was first put in place, we've got an ever aging population, so people are living longer. Technologies are being developed that cost more money, so the demand versus the supply just isn't right nowadays. Whereas in 1948 when it was first put into place, it was. So the solution, I don't. I've got ideas for nursing as to what I think the solution might be, and I've sort of alluded to them a little bit. But it's a bit idealistic to think that people would want to come into nursing. But we are hemorrhaging nurses, and if we don't do something fast, we're who's going to look after us in our old age? You know.
Hmm.
So it is a concern. It really. And when I say nursing, Dawn, you know I mean midwifery.
Dawn actually just says, my friend works as a healthcare assistant for an agency and she earns twice as much as Dawn as a senior midwife. And then Lynn Henson says, the absolute lack of investment has driven us towards feeling a more privatized system would be better. But look at what happens in the USA. If you have cancer, you are likely to go bankrupt trying not to die. Private insurance is all well and good, but it soon stops paying out if your condition continues or reaches a limit. And then Diana says, demand far now exceeds resources.
Yeah. So the taxi driver lady that we were talking to, it's in Spain. It's even more, and you're probably able to tell me more than the taxi driver. But she was saying that if you live in Barcelona and you visit from Ibiza and go to Barcelona and need healthcare, you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's not. Some services are free, but only for the people that live in Barcelona. So it's almost like a postcode lottery, but literally it's area to area. You know, it's not country to country. So
And
it's
yet we
really
know of
worrying. I don't
people,
know what the answer is.
who have been waiting for treatment back over in Britain and or in Ireland, and weren't able to get it, and they went. Someone I shared the information through the Vocal Booth family after visiting Villa Hyosa last year. Asked about local hospitals, went and had a procedure for a third of the cost in an Alicante hotel, and he said the healthcare was incredible. So I'm looking at your face on the screen here, whereas I should be looking you in the eyes through the
No,
camera.
don't worry
But
about that. It's
I
fine.
am actually looking at you. So I mean, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, it's a bit of a crazy conversation for a DJ and a clubber to have, but it's really interesting for me to sit and listen to your story. You are. You've always been proud and wore, that badge with honor. But yet now, as you say, the whole system is in dire straits, so to speak. I'm just reading another comment here. Andrea says, we don't have doctors either. Many have taken retirement early in the last 2 years. They've been in a dilemma for more than 10 years and it was never addressed.
Do you
It's
know what I think? Because I've mentioned more than once, I think, at Vocal Booth that I retire in 2 years.
mhm.
Not that I'm banging on about it, but I I want to finish my nursing career doing what I went into nursing for in the first place, going back to the beginning of the conversation, and I want to care for people in a way that I think will actually benefit them. So as much as I've learned how to diagnose, prescribe, you know, all of that stuff, it I'm now exploring much more. And we were talking about, podcasts and the things that you listen to and are of interest to you. So I'm much more being drawn into the more holistic medicine, working on leaky gut. For those that don't know what that is what we eat is so important. And I'm much more going down that road and thinking about doing Reiki therapy or something like that, so that in my retirement I can work flexibly with a number of income streams, but also it will satisfy my the fundamental reason why I became a nurse in the first place. So
Mhm.
um just saying what you were saying about clubbing, I could talk about clubbing all day long, but
We
they
can,
may have been
no problem.
disappointed as it was Confessions of a Nurse.
No, we can carry on. I mean, it's generally I sometimes I get lost thinking that I'm talking to a thousand strangers, and at the end of the day, it's just all us friends sat here enjoying a conversation like we would around a table. So if there's anything that you want to discuss, then that's absolutely fine. I'm just checking my my questions here that I actually put some questions down. We talked about the honour of being a nurse. Were you ever embarrassed of working for the NHS or never?
Right now, really, because it doesn't. People, you still get the plaudits and the thanks. That still comes because don't forget as well that my embarrassment. Yeah, I'll tell you what my embarrassment is the fact that I'm not on the front line anymore. So when I was a nurse consultant, I had a great job because 3 days a week I was a nurse consultant. So I did a lot of policy writing, strategy, developing educational. I taught, developed and taught a master's course at Canterbury Christchurch University, worked for University of Brighton. I was doing lots of that sort of stuff. But 2 days a week I was a community matron. So I had a caseload and I saw patients and I was the happiest I've ever been. And then my chief nurse at the time wanted me to be a nurse manager and become assistant director of nursing. And she decommissioned my nurse consultant role and gave me no choice but to go into this role. So, and I've stayed in this role now for a long time. I got a secondment to NHS England as deputy director of nursing for the South East, and I loved the system work. I loved working, influencing over a wide area, but it was only a secondment, and then NHS England merged with NHS Improvement, and they froze all the jobs, and I had to go back to my assistant director of nursing role. So I've been in this role for a long, long time. And depending on your chief nurse, depends on how they want you to run the role. So my role is basically very desk driven.
Hmm.
And with COVID came the invention of Teams, Microsoft Teams. And so it's very easy for me to sit on Teams from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, without a break. And the embarrassment, to answer your question, came when COVID all kicked off. I went back to my ITU route. So they didn't want me to, but I trained up. I did all, I went and did shadow shifts and did some courses and things just to gem myself up and get able to use all the electronic equipment that was very different. But it was like riding a bicycle. So I worked in ITU for a little while during the pandemic, but then I got asked to go and set up a field hospital in Brighton, to come up with the nursing workforce plan and the governance framework, for a 350 bedded hospital. And then the military pulled that, and then they sent me back. And my manager said to me, I need you working strategically, managing the workforce, because there were times where we had 28 patients that should have had 4 registered nurses and they had one. And there was one day that I remember we had 5 areas with 1 nurse each for 5 28 bedded wards. And we had opened up hospitals, like literally we commandeered a nursing home, opened up a hospital to manage demand. So you can imagine it was moving numbers to make staffing safe. And I coordinated that because the heads of nursing were all crying. They're all infighting in their department. And I had to say, look, we can do this and we can get through this and we can provide the evidence that we've done the best we can and we will do it. But my embarrassment, always still to this day, is that I'm not out there helping them physically.
Mm.
When you've got a full emergency department and there's patients that need feeding and watering that are waiting for a bed, they need to go to the toilet. Where do you get the privacy and dignity in a corridor? And I should be down there helping with that stuff. But I had to make that difficult decision about where can my skills be best utilised.
Hmm.
And during the pandemic, it was as a nurse leader, as a nurse manager. Um,
Well, you definitely were there. I'm
but that's my
reading some of these
embarrassment.
comments. I hear that. I hear that. We're getting a lot of comments here. Let me just read. If I can try and scroll back up here, if it will allow me to.
Oh, I'm
Um,
getting emotion.
yeah, you take a breath. Get yourself a drink if you need to. Um, why isn't this allowing me to read these comments, Andrew? Stop pissing about. Um, right. Let me try refreshing these comments because we've had quite a few different comments now. Right, here we go. So I'll scroll back up because I did see. Where did I get to?
I
Bear
remember,
with.
Wendy, you saying about what you did and being so impressed by that. Such a good job.
Oh, you can read the comments. Uh,
Yeah.
all right. Let me just. This is ridiculous. Why can't I read that? Maybe you can read them out for me because my comments screen has frozen. Someone
Yeah.
commented. I didn't recognize the name. If you could read that for me.
I can't. Oh my God, there's 140 comments. How many people on the stream?
I can't see it because if I try
Right.
and
No,
open
that's
my
140
windows.
comments for your inspiring bits. I was going to say. Um, so Jane Harrington said you should not feel embarrassed at all in capitals. Stu Miller's written it's a slamming indictment of the upper management of the system that someone as caring and loyal as Ange now feels some level of embarrassment working for the NHS. Um, we need these kinds of people to have the real influence and power. And that's what I felt I had a little bit of, Stu, when I worked for NHS England. I felt that I was finally able to influence policy. Um, but yeah, it wasn't to be.
I can
Wendy
see. I can
Sheehan,
see now.
yeah,
Kelly
definitely. I mean,
Kelly
Felicity just
Savory was a
echoed.
name that I didn't recognise. Thank you for commenting, Kelly. She says, "I'm a district nurse, and the service is at a breaking point. There is no staff. Management are expecting too much of the nurses with no capacity to manage patients. It's very
Yeah,
worrying." So that's where I actually got up to. And then Diana was making a comment about we can care and dance. We will start talking about dancing very soon. And then Lynn was all for the more holistic approach. And then Wendy commented as you read out. So Claire King, I was ward manager on the first COVID ward at Burton, and the amount of deaths a day was more than 5. Very stressful. So did you? Let's talk very briefly about the beginning of the COVID situation. It must have been very traumatic for you. Did you have long term? Did you suffer long term for what you saw and what you had to deal with?
I think with me it came out physically. So as everyone knows, I think so. I'll just tell everyone everything. I've got psoriatic arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease now, which I am determined to reverse. If I can find a way, I'm going to do it naturally. So, but I think that because I coped psychologically and mentally and emotionally, so my personal resilience appeared strong. I genuinely think it's come out physically with me.
Yeah.
It has to come out somewhere. I line manage our lead chaplain, and he's had to have some cardiac procedures. You can't imagine what their job was like in an
Mm-hmm.
acute hospital at the time. So it's really interesting because I've blocked it all out. It was like it happened yesterday. Everyone seems to have forgotten it now, actually, even though we've got. I mean, today we had the best part of 70 positive patients with COVID still in our hospital, 2 hospitals, acute hospitals. So, but it's like it's business as usual now. But I had to write quite a long narrative to uh, uh, predominantly a Facebook friend, really, who I felt I had to justify some of the comments that when you didn't want to get involved and let COVID come between you and friendships. Um, I just felt compelled to write it.
COVID deniers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I did write. I wrote to him, and I read this back just before I came on air, and I I was really shocked about what I'd written. Actually, um, yeah. I mean, I could read it out, but it might be a bit boring. But
Go for it. Go for it.
so I'll just pick out the relevant bits. Initially in March 2020, I worked in ICU after 30 years away from it. Then I spent a period of time along the coast. I've told you all that bit. Blah blah blah. We had the initial peak in March, but then from November to February, we had a wave far worse as we were hit with the Kent variant. So we were in Hastings, and then there was a Kent variant that just swept through us along the coast. As stated before, I'm not going into the detail of what all of my colleagues at all levels and our support services went through, which included Rick, my 4 children, and 2 daughter-in-laws, who all work at one of the hospitals, and we all did shifts in and out the door, day and night. It was bizarre. Suffice to say that 12 to 14-hour days, nights on average, 6 days a week was usual. As high as the peak of admissions on the daily published graph, so we had this graph doing this, was the same amount of absent staff suffering from COVID, self-isolation, carers, etc. Managing increased activity with half the number of nurses was a near impossibility. We lost members of staff who died, and we still have staff off sick with the effects of long COVID and psychological trauma. I will not go into the details of which have been well documented and reported in the media. The public cannot possibly understand what it's like to live through what the NHS have. And so my belief is that they have become completely desensitised to the images of staff working on the front line, and in some cases think it's a setup. It is not. I can only speak from my own perspective, of course, but I've not witnessed any restrictions or massive impositions that have been unwarranted or unnecessary. We have been in a war where we have lost over 3 million people worldwide. And yes, as in all war, there will always be casualties. Yet it is possible that we will lose the same amount through mental health deterioration, domestic abuse, of which I'm only too aware of in my work. If not more. But if those restrictions had not been in place, then we would have lost far more to COVID. There was a distinct and tangible increase in hospital admissions, which correlated with the lift of lockdown towards the end of summer. So when the Kent variant hit and cases of the South African variant were present in the UK, then I don't see what other course of action there was to take. With regards to this being a proportional response, what would you have done differently? Just stand back and watch people die, as it is occurring now in India? Because that did happen, didn't it? What do you think is happening will happen to the mental health of the surviving population, given what they're witnessing now? We have many Indian nurses working in our trust, and the tales of their relative suffering is unimaginable. I think it's enough. It goes on.
The problem is people, as you say, becoming desensitized to it, and I have friends who will fall into the category, so I'm not being disrespectful to them, but everyone's too quick to throw down their own expertise on something that they really know absolutely nothing about, and throw up their ideas of what should be done, and why are we having a vaccine that it doesn't stop you getting this, and what's the point? Everyone's dropping down dead of heart attack, and then people jump up saying, yeah, we told you we were correct. And really, who are we to have these kind of comments? It's crazy, but as you say, you do have to step back sometimes and not allow it to come between friendship, because people do have different opinions.
Absolutely,
but
and
sometimes
I've made friends with all the. Well, I don't get involved because I can't. So we've got a code of conduct as nurses that we can't, voice our political views. So I'm very, very cautious about what I do put online. But I'm also not a disbeliever in conspiracy either. So I'm not daft enough to think that we don't know how it started in the first place. But when you get people sort of campaigning outside George's Tooting as people are coming off after a 12-hour shift, all I can say is it was real. It was real for us that were working it. And I also, having worked at NHS England level, I also know how the vaccination progress would have been rolled out. No one would have done that. So like the Professor Whitties and everything, they would not have done that through malice. So those people that were, and the figures that were being published, I know would have been accurate because we could feel it on the ground floor. So we knew that those figures were accurate. And no one did what they did through COVID out of malice. They did it because they had to do something,
And as you said, mistakes were made. In hindsight, you have the opportunity to look again and make better calculated judgments once you know what the outcome is. But I think it always sticks in people's minds when they look at the figures and say, well, there's no coincidence that this guy's his mate and he made X billions of pounds. Do you buy into any of that?
Oh yeah, completely. Like I'm talking about sort of NHS England's regional level or whatever. Government made of course they made billions out of it. I have absolutely no doubt they could have managed it better. They could have made quicker decisions. They could have listened to the scientists. They could have maybe prevented deaths, but they made a big deal out of it. They made a lot of money.
Okay,
My view.
so, yeah. Right, I get you. Right, okay. So from the darkness of the COVID,
Yeah,
let's
we need to finish on a high, Andy.
what is it that you want to what is it that you want to discuss surrounding clubbing and being able to talk for days about your passion for music? Yourself, Henrik.
Yeah, I just think for me, it's just, I mean, this will be the same for a lot of people and it'll resonate with a lot of people. It's been my constant through good times and bad. I remember the moment when I first heard my music. So I was babysitting. I think I must have been 13, 14, something like that. I had a little transistor radio, tiny little, with a little aerial.
Hmm.
I lived in Hastings and I was bored stiff. My sister, who's 6 years younger, she was in bed, and it was New Year's Eve, and I'm at this age where I'm like I'm wanting to go out, um, and I sat listening, and I was tuning in, and I managed to pick up this sound, and it was soul. Basically, it was some soul record. Can't even remember what it was now, but I just thought, what is this? And then I found out it was Invicta Radio, and the DJ that was playing music was Pete Tong. And it was that moment, I remember that moment really distinctly, where I thought, I've got to listen to this radio station all the time. I've got to listen to this show. I've got to find out who this DJ is. And it started from there, and it's never left me. So whatever darkness has been happened in my life, I'll always go to music. And sometimes, and I love old stuff. I love all genres of dance music, soul music, jazz music, disco, whatever it is. I love it all. Um, Even hip hop, we were listening to, me and my son were listening to the daytime sessions at Vocal Booth, and my son came in and went, "Do you know who this is playing? Like, it's such and such from 1980, whatever, because he's all into his hip hop." So yeah, it's always been a constant for me, and it's always been my comfort. But sometimes I listen to new music as well, and I buy new music, but sometimes it starts to irritate me. So it depends on what sort of mood I'm in. Like, if sometimes I get really irritated with listening to new music, and I think I can't be bothered to listen to that. I'm too overloaded with everything else. But then I'll always go back to it, and it will always be my consistency, my comfort, my love, and going out and dancing to it kills all ills. Really, it's really funny.
Yeah.
I felt my joints all went down during Vocal Booth. It's bizarre. It's either the hot weather or just the fact that I was feeding my soul.
Hmm. Therapy indeed. As actually you've just said that. Diana says music is food for our souls, and
It is.
Katrina says take her to the dance floor. Wonderful. So from clubbing, you've met a great group of people outside of Vocal Booth, and of course an event that we run, Vocal Booth Weekender. We have a really good community weekly weekends as well on the radio, where we have everyone's chatting. A lot of the people here will be aware of that. And it's just about everything in life, really, coming back to what you were saying at the very beginning, you having that desire, that passion to having a calling to want to help people as you are moving on in life now. You want to continue to do that, and you've got desires to continue along the music. Now, I don't know if you said this in jest or you were being serious. You gonna think about getting some equipment and start playing music?
You know what? I was probably very drunk when I said that, but actually, I don't know whether it would take the joy out of it, or whether it would add to the joy. And I would be a bedroom DJ. I mean, I wouldn't be, it's going to come and watch me play or whatever. But um, yeah, I'd like to have a dabble.
Hmm.
I'd like to have a go. I mean, we've got behind me, we've got 1210s and our Technics, and we've got loads of vinyl, not as much as you. So I could mix two records together.
So
But
are
so
we gonna
yeah,
are we gonna
it,
start with are we gonna start with Clash of the Titans next year?
do you know what? In for a penny, in for a pound.
There you go. So we have our first Titan contestant
With no
next year.
gimmicks, it'll be the music only, I can tell you.
Exactly. Well, that's the way it's going now. So that's good to hear. And so what I started off was saying that we surround ourselves with very influential, inspirational, motivational people, pure positive vibes, because that's all there really is that you need to surround yourself with. And being with a lifelong partner now, life's too short, isn't it, really, to deal with anything less than just pure positivity.
It is, and I think we overthink things too much. I Rick's been just incredible in my life because I was a born worrier. I was in a really bad place really when I met him. And he was so laid back, just so laid back he'd fall off his chair. And nothing phased him. And he saw the positive in absolutely everybody and everything. So I think we've sort of balanced ourselves out a little bit over the years. But he was my inspiration and my rock. And I just wake up and it's all a bit there's a lot of there's and I absolutely think it's the right time. There are lots of life coaches at the moment. There are lots of people lots of memes on Facebook trying to, and I can imagine being in a dark place and your mental health being affected at the moment. And actually it's a bit of that desensitization thing. I think you get to that point where you do get a bit desensitized sometimes. I find myself sometimes flicking through a little bit when I don't want to flick through. I want to read it properly and digest it and take it in. But they're and you can't just tell people just be positive. It's not that simple for a lot of people that suffer with mental health. And I grew up with it and I know it very, very
Hmm.
well. And it's not that simple to just be positive. But I think if you are in that state of mind and you are in that frame where you can see the good in every day and you can do that sort of affirmation thing and be grateful for what you've got. I mean, I genuinely, it's interesting what, I don't know whether you wrote it or said it, but about never go to bed on a bad word. You know,
Hmm.
it's a bit the other way for me and Rick. We wake up in the morning, we look at each other and we go, we're still here. We're still alive. Nothing's gone wrong. So that's how we start our day. But um, it's I think if there are people around that are in that space and can try and inspire people and be cheerful and be loving towards one another, then that's all we can do is try and make the environment around us for people better.
Hmm.
And that's why I think the other consistency in my life associated with music has been the message boards. Ever since I've had a computer, I've been talking to people, and you can say, oh yeah, they're not really friends. They're just virtual people. You don't even speak to them on a dance floor. You're always drunk or whatever. You can look at it that way, but actually over time, you do develop that friendship, and I genuinely treat my online buddies as friends now. We had a great Revolve chat in on Pressure Radio the other night because they're all the people that were on the chat were the old Southport message board. You were missed at that point, Andy.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's important to try and spread a bit of cheer where you can.
Indeed, definitely. Well, that's what I'm all about. I will always do that. I wake up, go to the gym, come back in this complete euphoric state of just wanting to just tell everyone you can change your life. I've got my friend over at the moment, Gary. They've just bought a holiday home in Spain, and I'm just over the moon for him. That knowing that we've been able to inspire him. It's all his own hard work, of course, that he's been able to do it. But him and his wife and his children, they've got a place they can come over. We're in the gym, and it's just if you can have that energy around you of positivity and try and share that with people, why wouldn't you want to do it? And so that's why we have a great community here, who watch my stream, who listen to Pressure Radio. We're going to be enjoying Mark Wilkinson's book club tomorrow evening. More positive people. And it doesn't have to be with an ulterior motive. It doesn't have to be because I think you're maybe like myself. It's not necessarily money driven. You're not focusing on chasing that big money. It's just everything that comes with it. Am I right in assuming that?
Yeah, and it's so yeah, so what the NHS has done for me, it's given me a lot. I've given it a lot, and it's given me a lot, and nursing has given me a lot as well. Although I felt really despondent recently, as I think most people working in the NHS do, but I think if you're a nurse and a practitioner, you've got to remember you've met and influenced so many people in your career. And I know you said 30 years, it's 40 years next year for me. So you've influenced so many people, patients and staff, that they remember you. So,
Hmm.
spreading that. And so I've never done it for the money. But what's happened is that I've ended up with an okay pension because I started it very late, my pension. And we'll be all right. And it's never about the money for me. And I think that's why Mark's book club is really interesting, because it's almost like you get into that mindset of feeling guilty that you think you need more money if you've just got enough. Because what's important is your health. At the end of the day, what's important is your health. But actually, even even with good health, or if you're unfortunate enough to have ill health, every day counts. And there's no getting away from it. If you've got income and you've got money, those days are going to be a ball, aren't they? You're going to have a whale of a time. We've always said if we win the lottery, the first thing that me and Rick are going to do is rebuild the bathing pool in St Leonard's. It was an open air salt water like a Lido, and that shut years ago. And we want to open that up so the kids can enjoy it. That you can do so much with money, so there's no
Yeah.
getting away from it. So yeah, I'd love to have money. I'd love to have more money, but yeah, the focus for me is being happy every day
Hmm.
and finding the best
Fantastic.
in things.
Well, we end up on a strong plug for Mark Wilkinson's book club. Go and
Yes,
check it
hope you're
out.
listening,
We'll be there
Mark.
tomorrow. We'll be both there tomorrow. So listen, we've been happily talking away after the initial 10 minutes of technical nonsense. So many incredible comments that you can see yourself, I'm fairly certain. People you've met because of Vocal Booth, people you've met because of other events and whatnot. I want to say thank you to all of those guys for being here. And everyone is saying yes, a resounding yes to you joining Clash of the Titans next year. So that's confirmed. That's happening.
Oh my mum, Andrea, I need your help.
So there you go. So I think we've kind of covered everything that we were going to cover. Do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just thank you for the opportunity, because, and I want to thank Stu as well, because if he hadn't have nominated me, I wouldn't have nominated myself, because I don't think that what I do is necessarily interesting, or my life is necessarily interesting. But I haven't told you half the stories of nursing that I had lined up. The humorous and funny ones. But yeah, maybe I'll get my daughter, who is a professional writer. She needs to write me and Rick's memoirs, because we've got stories for days.
Well, I was going to say if you keep talking to Mark, he might even talk you into writing a book. So who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah, absolutely.
With
We
retirement.
should. I know you're going to do parenting soon, for people that single parents. But yeah, me and Rick have always said we just need a camera in the kitchen. What an eye opener! What a sitcom that would be.
Bless this house, or
Yeah,
whatever it's
exactly.
called, the not so good life, or the even better life. Right. Listen, I will leave you to your evening. I'll say a few goodbyes to everyone. Thank you so much for your time. And you say your story wasn't very interesting. The whole point why I do these things is just chatting to friends and getting them to share their stories, because you have had an incredible career. You've lived an incredible life. You've still got a long way to go as well. And it's nice to be able to document that now, and heap some praise upon you, and let everyone show their love and appreciation for you. So I give you a round of applause.
Thank
Thank you
you, and
very
thank you for
much.
joining, everyone. Thank you for staying. You can all go
Wicked.
now.
Right, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. I'm sure I'm going to break something now. Thank you, my love.
Okay, take care.
Bye. Okay, well, we did get there. We did get there in the end. Thank you for your patience, everybody. So many comments, so many video likes, so many shares. Very briefly, if you give me 2 minutes of your time, I'll start wrapping up. As you can see, new graphics I've been messing around with, new camera angles, This week I had a little bit of an extra push trying to get some more access subscribers. You will have received emails. If you're an existing subscriber, you would have seen me post something just yesterday explaining what it is, because still people message me and they're not really sure what I'm trying to do. So I put like a bit of a long post on, and a few people reached out. So now we're actually up to 85 people out of the desired 100 subscribers. That will help us achieve so many things. And so thank you. You can see all of the logos here. When the stream finishes now every week, all of your names will be on a roll call. You'll see the new angle, the camera up here looking into the studio. You'll get to see the new setup with all these lights. And thank you if you are an Access member. If you happen to come across this video for the first time while we've been discussing Angela's journey in the NHS, then do check out some more videos. There's a whole heap of fantastic conversations I've been having with some of the UK's leading DJs and producers. And I've also been having other life conversations talking about depression, health, addiction. And you can see here on the screen next Wednesday, I've changed to Wednesday for some reason that escapes me now, but next Wednesday I'll be talking to two friends who were living a very happy life together with two beautiful children, and then things changed, and it got a little bit tricky, and they're more than happy to come on and discuss how they do a wonderful job together now, co-parenting their two wonderful children, bringing up children together apart. That's going to be next Wednesday. Let me see if I can go back and look at any of your comments. No, I'm not going to do that because I'll just break something, I'm sure. Thank you all for being here. Let me read your comments. I can see them now. Everyone saying thank you, Angela, giving her lots of love and praise, and they loved listening to the story. That's wonderful. Yes, a huge round of applause for that young lady. So I will say thank you very much for being here. I'll see you on Sunday for the radio show. And all of these people that have liked and shared the video, thank you very much. It's truly, truly appreciated. And I'm out of here. I'm going to see if this works. Stick around and see your name on the screen. Thank you, guys. One love.